Hello, this is Mike from Dimensional Walking, and today we're going to do an adventure. I will call this one my Vortex Adventure and More. And there's a question. Is reality what it seems? That is your question to ponder today. So, let me start this out by saying after 12 hours, a very long trip, I found myself in a remote area in northeastern corner of Washington State. Okay, this is a true story, based on a true story, my own life's true story of many, many stories. So my first night I stayed at a friend's house. My friend's name is Kiwani Lapsaritis, and he's an old friend. We've done many adventures together in the past, and uh, he's just a great guy, and he does vortexes. He's a Sasquatch whisperer, as I like to call him. And anyway, so I found myself at his house, or one of his places I visited, but this particular house. And the house itself is, it's not that far from civilization, as I like to call it. It's surrounded by a series of small vortex areas. So the first night I rested in the luxury of an indoor toilet and a shower, and that would probably be my last night for a while, anyways. So the next day, I did a little tour around his beautiful property, and then at that point, I started my vortex photography, which is made up of shooting into dark areas of the property. In this particular case, um, I had learned this technique um from a Native American shaman, probably about 20 years before that. Um, so the dark areas is where he calls them, this Native American shaman calls them the special beings hide out. And if he said, if you have a digital camera, you can pick them up. Well, with luck and skill and whatever, uh, I started picking some of them up on Kiwani's property. And so there was this uh, being that was directly across. See, I didn't know if it was a he or it was a she. It was directly across from the front of the main house. Okay. And Kiwani told me there was also an ancient one there, it being similar to a Sasquatch, but looks more similar to a human. It has a human face with some facial hair, long head hair, and normal length arms, human arms. Okay. It can also be quite tall. This one was particularly estimated to be about 7 foot tall, but some of them can be as 5.5 foot tall. And so, anyways, my colleague Kiwani, and we'll consider him the lead researcher on this team, identified the photo I had taken as a possible young ancient one or a youth. Okay. And please note here, as amazing as the photo was, he, Kiwani, was telepathing with different beings throughout our trip. Okay. Or as he says, nudging him. That was the term he likes to use. They're nudging him, talking to him in his mind. Uh, so the next thing we did is we drove 50 miles into a primitive camping area where for the whole time it was us, nature, and the very strange. We coexisted for the next 4 nights there. So the first day in our new paradise, we moved deeper into a major vortex area. And then more stuff started happening. During our trip through the vortex area, there was a large Sasquatch footprint in the middle of our path. Although it was filled in somewhat with mud and water, it was still a footprint. No mistaking it. It was definitely a Sasquatch footprint. So the First 3 nights, we enjoyed a series of hooting and hollering from the Sasquatch. It was pretty much, I don't want to say it was continuous, but every night there would be this serenade of hollering and hooting from the Sasquatch. For the first time I had heard the hollering and hooting, uh, all every hair on my body literally stood up because the sound is nothing like you've heard before, especially especially when it's in that close to you. Okay, it was close. I would say for the most part, it was probably maybe within 10 feet of. Now there was also stamping and stomping of their feet around the area. Okay, and you can definitely feel it. It actually shakes the ground. Okay, so and again, it's quite a shock to have Sasquatch, ancient ones, whatever, that close into a camp area. So that was in the evening hours of the night before we went to bed. We'd always have this little ceremony. So one of the next days, we continued to walk through this vortex area. Suddenly, in the middle of nowhere, this is in the middle of a dense forest. Okay, so dense that if a wind blew around the forest, you would probably not feel it inside. Suddenly, though, there was this shrub bush was shaking violently to the left and to the right, to the left and the right on our path. And the shaking continued for several minutes. Note again, there was no wind, and it seemed like an invisible force was moving the shrub. Kiwani said it was an ancient one showing his or hers presence. Okay, and apparently they do that a lot, where you'd be walking through the woods and suddenly be a branch or a tree or something, and it would be shaking violently. Not a wind type thing, because it was a left shake and it was a right shake, and it kept that moving back in different directions. Okay, unlike a wind would do. Okay. Um, and then also, I just want to make a point. There was another interesting thing as we were going down the mountain, and there was absolutely no wind at all. There was some plastic road signs on the side of the road, and you could see them ahead of us. It wasn't that we passed them and make them shake, but they were violently moving back and forth also. And Kiwani said it's probably a Sasquatch trying to, you know, make his presence known. Um, so So then it was probably the next thing I'm going to tell you about was probably the most profound thing during the trip, I think, anyways. So we were laying one night. This is probably one of the last nights before we left. And I was laying in a sleeping bag on one side of the tent, and Kiwani was on the other side of the tent. We were both facing each other. And Kiwani was snoring, by the way. And anyways, suddenly there was a hand that came through the tent and two large fingers on that hand. I could kind of see by looking. I don't want to say I was paralyzed, but I didn't move only because when you have a large hand, a large hairy hand on your shoulder, tendency is you're not going to move. Right? Okay. So, anyways, that hand stayed there for it seemed like forever. I'm sure it was maybe only 5 minutes. It just sat there quietly on my shoulder, and eventually it moved out through the tent. Okay, and we won't go into what that means by through the tent. That's a whole nother discussion. Okay, so I didn't immediately at that minute tell Kiwan. I let him sleep. We got up in the morning and we were driving down to have breakfast. We actually were treating ourselves. We're going into there was a little town. Oh, I guess it was still a good 15 miles away. So we went down to the town, and I didn't really mention to him about what happened. Um, He kind of he made a reference. He just said it was really a very restful night. Everything was very, he just did the normal kind of talk after we, as we were driving down to eat our breakfast. Um, so I said, well, it was restful, but I did have an incident. He said, oh yeah, what? He said, well, I explained to him exactly what happened. He didn't seem to be very surprised at all. I said, oh, okay, well, I had kind of telegraphed to the Sasquatch that maybe you'll need a little something to remember our trip by. And he said, well, I guess that's probably what they did. And it was just a matter of fact. It wasn't anything that was like, to him, was that exciting? To me, of course, it was extremely exciting. But anyways, that's sort of the way it was when you're dealing with somebody like Kiwani that has had these type of experience all his life. And anyways, I was grateful. Whoever caused this or communicated the information to Sasquatch to have that type of close encounter was pretty incredible. Um, so so there was of course being touched by an ancient one or a Sasquatch, whatever it was, and all the hollering and hooting that happened. Two more events on this mini, we'll call it a mini expedition, have produced lasting memories. So there's a little bit more to it. So first, the people of this part of the northeastern part of Washington State were very gracious and accommodating, discussing pure knowledge of all the strangeness in the forest. Their encounters with these paranormal beings were very much normal in their way of life. So here you got a small town. You go around, talk to the people, including local police and sheriffs, and it's just a matter of fact. And many of the people in the little community, they would just talk, and they'd have names for different Sasquatch, and they would say uh, Jerry, and they were normal names like Tom or Jerry, Bill. Uh, they would say, "Hey, I saw them in my orchard last night. They were picking apples and this, that, and the other." And of course, this part of Washington had a lot of apples and stuff, and Sasquatch really like apples. Okay. And so they would tell us these interesting little stories about what, they saw last week or yesterday or the day before. But it was very common. There was not a big deal about, oh my God, I saw Sasquatch. They see Sasquatch all the time. So that was in itself was quite incredible to go to such a place. Okay. By the way, if you ask me, I probably won't tell you where it is. Okay. One of the things that Kiwani told me, and one of the things the sheriff told me, and one of the things that people that I interview that I talked to there told me that please don't tell the world who we are or where we're located. Okay. They didn't want to have a lot of people coming there and flocking there. Uh, and the only reason I was lucky to do it because they knew Kiwani and the sheriff knew Kiwani, and we were able to talk among ourselves, and that was about it. Now I can kind of tell you the story. That's what I'm doing, but I'm not going to tell you where it is. So please don't ask because I'm not going to tell you. Um, so it seems like everybody there had some type of experience, is what I just told you. And know some reliable person that also had experiences too. It wasn't just them, they knew other people that had experiences. And they were willing to make these comments and help add a piece of the puzzle to one of the greatest, I think, mysteries of our human history, naming, namingly that we live in a multi-dimensional world which is shared by Sasquatch and a host of other beings that at times they will come out and play. There's no doubt they will come out and play. And lastly, I stood in the middle of the night. Um, this was the last thing that I kind of did. It was the last night there. So I was just standing there, and this was in the middle of the night. I got up, probably go to the bathroom, okay, and I just happened to after I was finished, I went there and I just stood in the quietness, and it was just this great, I want to call it great darkness and huge beauty. And we were only a few miles from Canada. Um, and suddenly there was no crickets, there were no bird sounds, there were no small creatures. Nothing was making a sound. It was dead silent. You could actually, it turned out I could hear my heartbeat, neurons in my brain, my mind. I could hear them firing. Never have I heard this type of void, but now I have. Now I did. I was hearing what I call God's voice in the vast silence of this magnificent place that we were at. So, what made its silence so profound was it set up your brain to wait for the sound that would totally imprint itself in your mind. It was truly like being in another dimension, a place where fantasy comes true. And I want to give a special thanks to my friend Kiwani for taking me on this journey. So, my question is reality not what it seems? Happy trails until we meet again. Bye bye.